This story is why you should never mess with Ouija boards. We moved into my dad's girlfriend's house where one of her daughters lived upstairs, my brother lived upstairs, her other daughter lived down in the basement, along with me who lived in a makeshift room in the basement. One night, me and her two daughters decided to buy an Ouija board. After my dad and his girlfriend went to bed, me and her daughters all went downstairs, grabbed a bunch of candles, set up the Ouija board, and grabbed a bunch of our great-grandparents' stuff. We wanted to see if any of our great-grandparents would talk to us. We were so excited because the Ouija board was working and things were moving it. We asked what the spirit's name was, expecting it to be one of our great-grandparents, but it said its name was Tick. T-I-C. We asked it to repeat it again, and it spelled out T-I-C. We knew that it wasn't one of our great-grandparents. Stay tuned for part 2. This is part 2 of why you should never do an Ouija board. So after it said its name was Tick, we asked how old it was. The spirit responded with 9 years old. We asked what gender it was. There was no response. We knew for sure at this point we were not talking to one of our great-grandparents. I wanted to stop right then and there. I was really freaked out and I knew that we weren't talking to something good, but my older stepsister wanted to keep going. So out of peer pressure, of course, I kept going. She asked if it was human. Its response was no. We asked if we were safe. The spirit said yes, but I really didn't feel safe. We asked if the spirit was stuck in the house. The response was yes. The next thing my older stepsister asked, which I really wish she didn't, is if Tick was the only one there with us. The response was no. 60 seconds is not enough time for this story, and the story is really long, so stay tuned for part 3. This is part 3 to the Ouija board story, and why you should never use an Ouija board. So my older stepsister asked if Tick was the only one there with us. The answer was no. She asked if all the spirits there with us were good spirits. The Ouija board said no. Right as we asked that, the bathroom was right behind us and we heard a huge loud slam in the bathroom. All of us were really freaked out just sitting there not knowing what to do. The candles started flickering. There was so much tension in the room. I have never felt anything like it. That is when my other stepsister screamed at the top of her lungs and told me to move. She saw a black hand approaching from behind me and was going to grab my face. Because she screamed so loud, my dad woke up and we heard him, so we said goodbye really quickly. I went upstairs really quick to calm my dad down and say everything was fine. But after that night, we awoke something and a lot more things happened. Stay tuned for part 4. This is part 4 of the Ouija board. So after we used the Ouija board, we definitely awoke something in the house. The energy downstairs was so intense that none of us could sleep down there. Because of this, me and my older stepsister slept upstairs for literally weeks. Remember the shadow of the hand that wrapped around my face in part 3? Well, that hand didn't disappear. My stepmom said she saw it multiple times when she would go downstairs and change the laundry. It got to the point where her and my dad didn't even want to go downstairs. The cat would chase things that weren't even there. Doors would slam. Floorboards would creak at night. My dad would constantly see my cat chasing a figure, and all you could see was the figure's spine. It would run on all fours. The hauntings got so bad that my dad decided that we needed to move out. Ever since then, nobody has lived in that house for longer than 2 months. The first story starts when I was 2. I don't remember it much, but my parents have told me this multiple times. We lived in this little white house. It was very old. My parents used to always hear me laughing and playing in my room with someone, but there was no one in my room. When they asked who I was talking to, I told them it was a little boy named Omar. They thought it was just an imaginary friend, but now that I think back on it, when I was 3 and 4, I did see someone. He was always very kind to me. I would play Barbies and he would play with me. He would draw me pictures. I would leave my books out for him so he could read while I was at preschool. I would tell him about my days and he would tell me about his. But things started to get really weird once my brother was born, and that is when my parents started to see him too. They believe that this is because he wanted to be the only little boy in the house. Stay tuned for part 2. Here is part 2 of the series of the little boy. When my brother was born, my parents used to sense and see the little boy as well. My mom used to feel his energy sitting in the rocking chair. My brother's mechanical toys used to just start making noise. He started to show up less and less in my room, and every time he would, he kind of scared me. He wasn't himself anymore. He was mad, angry, everything. My parents believe it's just because he wanted to be seen and he was lonely, and now that I had a little brother, I wasn't paying as much attention to the little boy. My mom would wake up to my brother crying in the middle of the night and go check on him, and she would sense something standing next to her. Weeks later, we moved out of that house due to a shooting in our backyard. My old nanny, who lived across the street, told us after we moved out, she would always see something in the window of my room. On my scary childhood stories. After my dad remarried, we moved into a blue house, and me and my stepsister shared a room. Right when we moved in, I already knew something was off about that house. It was just kind of creepy. I got weird vibes from it. Nothing really happened within the first couple months of living there until winter hit. Keep in mind, this was like during when I was 14 and 15. Me and my stepsister's room was right below the attic, and at night we used to hear footsteps up there. These weren't footsteps coming from an animal, they were more footsteps coming from heavy boots hitting the ground. I told my dad about it, and so he had an exterminator come over and check it out. When the exterminator came, he found no animals up there and no holes in which animals could get through. But that didn't stop the footsteps every single night. My dad didn't want me and my sister going up there, so one day when he was gone, we went up there by ourselves and found some really creepy things. Stay tuned for part 2. This is part 2 of the attic series. After the exterminator came and found no animals or places where animals could get into, me and my stepsister decided to go up into the attic after my dad had left. When we went up there, it was filthy. The first thing that we noticed were hangers, and they were hanging clothes and belts from the ceiling. The weird thing is the clothing didn't look that gross, and it looked like it hadn't been up there for very long. The energy up there just felt very intense, and we wanted to get out of there right away. The footsteps didn't stop after the exterminator came or after we went up there. We believe after we went up there, we made the spirit angry because weird things started to happen. The lights in the hallway used to turn on and off all the time, even though no one was upstairs because my parents lived downstairs. There'd be footsteps in the hallway, and when we would check, no one would be there. I can't fit everything in 60 seconds, so stay tuned for part 3. This is part 3 of the attic series. One night around 2 o'clock, my brother's door slammed. Take for granted he wasn't home, and then all of the lights in the entire upstairs turned off all at once. A couple seconds later, we heard this old man say hello outside of our door. We started screaming at the top of our lungs, and my dad came upstairs. He turned all the lights back on for us, and once he went back downstairs, the lights turned back off. We also used to sneak out of our windows a lot and leave them open, so when we got back, we could just climb right through, but when we'd come back, they would be shut. Our beds were pretty much right next to each other. There was just a little walkway in between, and if one of us would wake up in the middle of the night, we could feel a presence standing over us. The footsteps in the attic also never stopped. Comment if you want to hear more scary stories.
In high school, I had a friend who lived in this old, small apartment building. And on the first floor was this old guy named Dave who had apparently lived in the building forever. And no one really knew what Dave's deal was. The only time people saw him is when he walked outside to walk his tiny dog. But other than that, he never left his apartment. He had a nephew who delivered him groceries once a week. My friend just assumed that Dave was too old or had some sort of sickness that prevented him from leaving the house. One day, my friend was coming home from school and Dave's nephew was leaving the apartment building. And my friend is really sweet, so she was like, "Hey, I know Dave sometimes has troubles getting out of the house, so if you ever need me to go over there and bring him something, let me know. I'm always happy to help." And the nephew looked really shocked and terrified. He was like, "No, you should never go over to Dave's ever." And then he got really awkward and he was like, "Okay, gotta go, bye." And then a few weeks later, my friend was coming home from a Halloween party late at night. And when she got inside her apartment building, Dave's door on the first floor was wide open. And it was pitch black inside his apartment. But then she heard something behind her. So my friend hears something behind her, but it's pitch black. She's like, "Hello?" And then she finds the switch to the hallway lights, turns them on, and Dave is standing right there with his small dog. She's like, "Hey Dave, you kind of scared me." And Dave was like, "Oh, sorry, I was looking for the light switch myself." But that didn't make any sense because he wasn't standing anywhere close to the switch and he had been living in that apartment building for 30 years. So she starts walking up the stairs and then Dave says, "I've been working on a project that I'm really excited to show you." And my friend's like, "Oh, like an art project?" And Dave's like, "Yeah, kinda." And she's like, "Okay, well maybe my mom and I can come by another time to see it." And then they say goodnight, but she just feels pretty weird about the whole interaction. A few months later, she's at school and she gets a text from her mom that she has to work late and won't be home to make dinner. That afternoon, my friend walks home, walks up the stairs to her apartment building, goes to unlock the door, but then realizes the door's already unlocked. But then, all of a sudden, all the lights switch off. She tries to switch all the lights back on, but they're not working anymore. And all of a sudden, she's finding it really hard to breathe. She's afraid she might faint, so she kneels down onto the floor. Then suddenly, she feels sharp nails running down her back. And she tries to move, but she feels so weak that she can't. She turns around to see who it is, but before she can, she blacks out. The next thing she remembers is waking up in a hospital bed, and her mom is sitting next to her looking really worried. Her mom's like, "Everything's okay. There was a carbon monoxide leak in the apartment, and you passed out." The nurse is like, "In the next few weeks, you may feel tired or sluggish or have have hallucinations, don't worry, that's totally normal. And my friend is like, what about the back scratches? Her mom's like, what are you talking about? So she runs to the bathroom, pulls up her hospital gown, and there are 4 dark scratches on her back. When she comes back from the bathroom, her mom looks concerned and she goes, honey, there's also something else you should know. Dave, who lived on the first floor, passed away, and they've been cleaning out his apartment and they found something. And it might freak you out, but I feel like you should know about it. Mom tells her that they found a weird box of things in his closet, and inside that box were random pictures of her, an old hairbrush, pieces of hair, a pair of shoes that she thought she had lost. And the nurses think that the scratches are from when she fainted, but she's sure she felt someone scratching her back, and she's sure that it was the ghost of Dave. When I was 16, my friend Lexi and I were trying to get super fit one summer. So we made a pact that we were going to swim around this one rock every day that summer. The swim wasn't that long, it only took like 15 minutes. But the rule was that you had to swim around the backside of the rock. You couldn't just go out and back. You had to go behind it. And the backside of the rock was always a little scary because once you got behind the rock, no one on the beach could see you anymore. So if anything happened to you, you'd be on your own. But we were ridiculously intense about it. Like we went turbo beast mode. We said that no matter the weather, no matter the size of the waves, the strength of the rip current, we would swim around the rock for the entire month of July every day. And we were super serious about this commitment. Like one day, Lexi ate a really bad pepperoni calzone and had the worst food poisoning. And she was literally shitting her pants. And I was like, Lexi, you don't have to swim with me today. And she still swam with me that day. Then one day, in the middle of July 16th actually to be exact, because I remember, we were swimming around the rock and something bad happened. So Lexi and I are swimming and we're like halfway through the swim on the backside of the rock. And while we're swimming, something hits me on the back. It literally felt like someone punched me underwater. And I scream and Lexi's like, what happened? But I was freaked out and I didn't explain it to her. So I just told her to swim to the rock, get out of the ocean and get on top of it. Once we were safe on the rock, I told Lexi what had happened and she was super freaked out. And I actually had a red mark on my back. So she knew I wasn't making any of it up. We stayed on the rock staring at the water, trying to spot anything moving for like 30 minutes. But after a while we were like, okay, well, we have to swim back at some point. So we decided to swim in. We literally swam as fast as we could back to the shore. When we got to the shore, there was an old woman on the beach looking at us kind of weirdly. She's like, where's your other friend? And we were confused. We were like, what? She's like, you had a third girl swimming with you, didn't you? And we were like, no, it's just us. And she's like, well, I definitely saw a third girl out there with you guys. But then a few days later, the local newspaper came out with a story titled Something in the Water. People at another beach a few miles away claimed that they were getting hit by something in the water. So people were claiming at this other beach in town that something was hitting them in the water. And they couldn't see what it was, but a few people had described the same sensation. The feeling of a really hard, blunt kind of punch in the water. So Lexi and I start to suspect that whatever's hitting people at that beach also hit me a few days earlier. And even though it was only July 19th, Lexi and I decided that it wasn't safe to swim behind the rock anymore. But I still would obviously go to the beach, and my favorite time to go was early in the mornings. And usually it would just be me at the beach at that time of day, but one morning I came down and the same old lady was standing there on the shore of the beach. She was just standing there with her feet in the water, but when I walked by, she turned around and she goes, "It must be a beautiful life out there. I bet they're happy." And then she bent down and picked something up from the sand and handed it to me. It was a type of shell that I had seen all the time. And she goes, "Do you know what these are? These are mermaid nails. We must have one living nearby this summer." And then she winks. A few nights later, I was at the beach again at a beach fire. And that's when I made a huge mistake. So a few nights later, we were having a beach fire, and it was really fun. Everyone was drinking, it was getting pretty rowdy. And then one of my friends proposes that we play Truth or Dare. So we're going around, and of course I'm feeling tipsy and therefore bold. So when it's my turn, I choose Dare. And this guy, Eddie, dared me to go climb up one of the big rocks, jump off into the ocean, and swim all the way in. But since hearing about this creature in the ocean, I hadn't gone in past my waist. But as I said, I was feeling drunk and brave, so I said fine. So I strip down ass naked, and I start walking towards the rock, and everyone's drunkenly cheering, but as I get further away, their cheers become quieter, and soon it's just me and the wind and the sound of the ocean. And I'm starting to get cold because even in July, the nights can get kind of chilly, and I'm standing on top of the rock about to jump in, but I close my eyes and I just jump in, and the water actually feels warmer than the air, and it feels good, and I'm happy I'm in it. But then I hear a small splash behind me. All of a sudden, I feel something take my hand, like grab it really aggressively. It feels like another hand holding mine, trying to pull me down, and I freak out and I scream and I pull my hand away and I start swimming faster than I ever have in my whole life. And then I feel the same thing grab my ankle, and I kick and I kick, and it's still holding on to it, but finally I kick really hard and I get it to let go, and I'm swimming even faster. Once I got to the point where I could touch, I just start sprinting through the water onto the shore. So I sprint back to the fire, and I'm trying to tell my drunk friends what had happened, but they think I'm trying to trick them, and they're all like, haha, nice, I can't believe you actually got in the water. So in the summer, I like to wear a lot of anklets because I think they look really cute on like tan bare feet. So I had a lot of anklets that summer, like rope braided anklets. So the next morning, I'm in bed and I feel something sharp against my ankle. So I pull my foot out from under the covers and I look, and stuck in one of my anklets is a shell. And I look a little closer and it's the same shell that the old lady showed me on the beach, a mermaid's nail.
Niggas really broke, I understand, but goddamn,